According to my brief but studious and intensive research, the damage record on the legendary tier Italian battleship Lauria is something like 338,000. This battle is my personal damage record in the ship. It's about 100,000 damage short of that, but we are going to break 200k and get quite a few juicy salvos on some enemy ships. I've had this battle sitting around for a while. I think I made a video about the Ohio the other week where I did about 230,000 damage. And if I remember correctly, that video was on this map as well. I was going to put up this Lauria game shortly after that because I was talking about Ohio being the best battleship at legendary tier and thinking that maybe Lauria was also up there in that discussion. And in the week or so since then, I haven't really changed that opinion. I think Lauria is a very strong battleship. The unfortunate thing is, not too many people have this vessel. It was just too prohibitive to obtain, but maybe someday it'll come back into the game and be a little bit more accessible for those who missed it. If you do have it, though, then you've probably found that this is one of the most consistent, hardest hitting battleships in the game, and that, of course, all comes down to the semi-armor piercing. Now, we spawn here near the alpha cap, so of course we're going to be playing the cap, coming out wide on the flank to see if we can catch any enemy ships. There's an A gear over there to the left, gone behind the island, and it looks like he's intending to use that tiny chain of two islands to maybe push forward and get closer to our team. Of course, he's a heavy cruiser with torpedoes, so at this point, we're not quite going to be pushing in yet. But we spot a grand prize, HMAS Brisbane, a Minotaur hull, lightly armored ship, one of the few cruisers that Lauria can citadel with the sap, and he just happens to be turning broadside so that he could be presenting the citadel to us. That, of course, causes him to take an early trip back to port. And in fact, he's the first one to go. We get Devastating Strike and First Blood medals all at one time, and in the span of one salvo, 58,000 damage done. I don't know about you, but whenever I get a salvo that good to start off a game, that's usually a harbinger of things to come. Probably means things are going to go well. Another salvo out at the A gear. The reload time on these guns is pretty short. I think it's only about 25 seconds. And that allows you to send more damage down range, but of course we miss the A gear. Not a problem. He is turning away a little bit. We are also turned away. We don't want to find ourselves pushing into the Yamato, get surprised by the enemy battleship that's somewhere over to the right of him, probably behind that island, and then have to deal with the A gear pushing into us at the same time. Lauria's got good enough armor to deal with Yamato and, of course, Borgonia over there, but, no armor is really going to protect you from torpedoes if a heavy cruiser decides to push into you and if you're being crossfired by battleships on both sides. A gear's out there, still keeping us in his thoughts, I suppose shooting, not at me, but at one of my teammates. Otherwise, I don't know how he's spotted. Borgonia is stopped, bow tanking. Yamato's moving a little bit, and I think next salvo is going to go his way. When ships are angled slightly, like the Yamato is, the sap doesn't really have a problem dealing damage to them, especially not something like Yamato, which does have 32mm bow and 32mm upper deck armor. We get about 9,000 damage there with two shells, not salvos. Not too bad, but we could use some more. At this point, though, I don't think we want to move from this flank, not just yet anyway. We're going to deploy one of the spotter plane consumables, try to tighten up the dispersion and get more damage on these guys. Maybe once we've got them finished off, we'll head over to the other flank. There's a better salvo, a little bit more than the last one. But the idea is we want to get rid of these guys or thin out the herd here. The rest of our team has pretty much abandoned Charlie, so we've secured Alpha, and the majority of the blue ships, minus the friendly battleship that has gone back to port, are over here. There's one battleship and one cruiser near Bravo. Cruiser's taking Bravo. Looks like he's hiding behind an island to some degree, but he's also broadside to the battleship that is north of that cap. So we're keeping an eye on the situation as it develops. Not having a ton of success here playing this bow tanking versus stern tanking exchange of shells with the two battleships, but Borgonia is reversing a little bit. The more he turns, the easier it'll be for the sap to pen. We're up to almost 100,000 damage now, and we've just elapsed 5 minutes in the battle. So things are going good. It'd be nice if we had broken 100k by this point, but don't worry, there is more damage to come. Now, however, the alpha cap is turning red, which is a sign of danger. We don't see the thing that's inside of the alpha cap, but we do see the grayed out outline of the enemy destroyer to the right of the alpha cap. Looks like he has gone into it, and, well, he's going to be right there taking it. I think the fact that we're still spotted, that may have something to do with the fact that our smoke firing penalty, or our firing penalty in general, was still up. But no, the daring is right there. He's about to turn broadside, which is going to make him a bigger target for these sap shells. Of course, they are hard-coded to do only 10% of the maximum damage against enemy DDs, so I think we get something like 1,600 a pop. We hit the daring, I think, with 2 shells there for about 3,000 something, so not bad damage. But, of course, the sap is not going to be dev-striking destroyers like it would the Brisbane. If it were allowed to, that surely would be something, but the Lauria is perhaps not the best battleship in the world when it comes to dealing with destroyers, and that's all down to the overpen damage that's hard-coded into the sap for battleships versus destroyers. I suppose if it were not that way, then a couple sap shells would be enough to dev-strike a destroyer. Maybe not super fun to play against, maybe a little bit overpowered, but it would certainly be nice in a scenario like this. At this point, though, Yamato, Borgonia have backed off. Daring is running away too. Well, no, he's still in the cap. He's still contesting it. But our position wasn't yielding very great results for us. It was very static. We were getting some damage on the Yamato and Borgonia, but the presence of that daring has caused us to reposition, and if we continue heading in this direction, we're probably going to run into the enemy battleship that is in the center. Looks like the center has essentially fallen. The enemy team is taking Charlie. We've got one battleship in the center kiting away, another facing the Charlie cap, and he appears to be bow tanking and reversing. So I don't have great confidence in his prospects. And, well, the daring wasn't the one spotting us. As you can see, the firing penalty goes down. Of course, for those of you who maybe aren't aware or haven't read the codex yet, every time you fire your guns, your detectability blooms out to the maximum firing range of your guns. And then after about 20 seconds or so, it goes back to normal. And that's how you can know, for example, especially if you build into concealment like I have. We have 12.6 kilometers of detectability on the Lauria. That's how you can know that a destroyer is in the danger zone. If you don't build for any concealment at all, you're probably at 14 kilometers or so. And if you get spotted by a destroyer with that kind of detectability range, well, then he could really be anywhere around you. But if you lower the concealment to something like 12.6, then you know when you get spotted that you're actually in danger and you should probably take evasive action and not sail in a straight line so that you can avoid torpedoes. Temeraire is the battleship in the Bravo cap, which is just fine with me. He's coated in 32mm plating everywhere, much like the Borgonia, so the sap should be able to make short work of him, provided he's not angled like he is now. Alaska B pushing in. We've also got another Lauria out there and a Yamato. Things are not looking great for the blue team. This kind of scenario that we're in right now has all the makings of a tragic and terrible loss. As you can see, the enemy team has taken both Bravo and Charlie. And if you take a look at the map, you'll notice that the blue team is sort of spread out in a line at the bottom of the map. We've got two battleships off to the right of the screen, and the rest of the team is off to the left. we're all sort of backed into this one corner of the map, which puts us at a disadvantage. It means we don't have really any map control at all. And in circumstances like this, oftentimes I think we would lose. The only way the enemy team really has of not being able to secure the victory here would be if they pushed into us too aggressively and simply sunk. Well, enter the enemy Lauria, who is pushing aggressively toward the two battleships, which by this point have more or less reached the map border. One of them's kiting, one of them is bow tanking, reversing away, and Lauria's headed straight for them. Of course, we're off to the side, and that means we've got his broadside as he pushes in toward our enemies. You know what I have said many times before is that the goal of the battleship is to put itself somewhere on the map where the enemy team has to push past its main battery guns in order to achieve some sort of goal. That goal could be taking an objective or it could be pushing into your teammates. And here I think we illustrate that pretty well with this enemy Lauria. We are in a position where he does have to push past our main battery guns if he wants to push into our teammates and brawl with them. And I guess after taking a bunch of damage from the sap, we switch to AP now. I guess the Lauria has decided the best thing he could do is stop and reverse while still being broadside to me. I don't know how well that's going to work for him. We get a Citadel there with the AP. We've got the high caliber metal now, and we've got nearly 200,000 damage. This Lauria's move was quite helpful, and it appears the rest of the red team has done as I suggested a little bit earlier, only a moment ago, in fact. I think there were 5 ships floating, one of which was the destroyer, and now there's only 3. There's about to be 2 because this Lauria is going back to port. Maybe not with that salvo. We get the fisting ribbon there. We don't even get the kill. What a shame. But we're back to the sap now, and that just leaves Alaska B and whatever that battleship is over there. I think it's the Temeraire. And that means essentially these two are just pinatas. So it's all gravy here. We just get to farm some damage. We can take some damage from the Temeraire, especially if it's HE. We've got, of course, this improved heal to help us out. And I think after this one's up, we still have one more after that. Temeraire turning away, but unangled enough that I think this could potentially be a pretty juicy sap salvo. Let's see here. No, of course it's not. We miss. But don't worry, we still are going to get some more damage before this battle ends. We've got most of the HP pool of a Temeraire to farm, and that Alaska is not exactly on low health. I guess he's approaching it closer and closer all the time. But now that there's only these 2 ships left alive, we're very far ahead on points. All we really have to do is sink these guys. And what they would need to do is not only survive, but they've probably got to sink a couple of us too, and that's just not going to happen. If the enemy team cedes map control like the blue team did in this battle, the way you lose is by taking the objectives and then continuing to push into the enemy team, as the Reds have done here. You can see the fruits of their labor are going to amount to a defeat. So if you find yourself in the position of any of these red ship players, you got to look around yourself and recognize we have the advantage, we have the caps, so therefore we don't need to push into the enemy. The enemy needs to push into us. And then at that point, you can fight them from a distance, safely, without sinking, instead of pushing into them and risking throwing the game. That's something that happens a lot in World of Warships Legends. I don't know that there's exactly a fix to it per se. Suppose you could try to communicate with your teammates and let them know the situation over the voice chat or something. But I, of course, personally leave the voice chat off because I don't really need to hear the advice from my teammates. A lot of times when people are talking on the voice chat, it's not constructive, unfortunately. I suppose that's the best way I could put it. A lot of times it's full of salt and rage, and if you've got someone raging at you in the voice chat, trying to tell you how you should play the game, why would you be inclined to listen to them? I certainly wouldn't be, not if they're raging. And I wouldn't expect that any random on my team would be inclined to listen to me either. So, I suppose there's maybe not much you can do about it. You just have to do the best you can in your own ship. And the best I've done in the Lauria is the damage you see here. 230,814. We've got the High Caliber, the Confederate, one Dev Strike, and one First Blood. Not a bad result in this ship, I would say. Enemy team finally goes down, and we win this battle, in spite of questionable positioning early on. I think the Lauria can probably deal a lot more damage than this. I mean, like I said earlier, the damage record on the ship is 338,000, about 100,000 more than I did. We end up with 3,300 XP, along with the Stalingrad, too. It's not often I see more than one ship above 3,000, but that Stalingrad is clearly a Chad. So GG's to him. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.